Okay, so it's wonderful to see all of you. And it's a really interesting topic that I was asked to speak on. The Vedic teachings as the science of everything. It's very, very interesting. In the world that we live in right now, there's so much going on. You turn on the news, you turn on the television, whatever it is, you're being bombarded. We're being bombarded with so much information. And at the same time, the Vedic literatures make a distinction about different types of knowledge, something that we'll touch upon today. One of the most famous, popular, essential book of Vedic teachings is the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna is speaking on the battlefield, speaking to Arjuna, he says, Raja Vidya Raja Guyam. He says, this knowledge is the king of all knowledge. Right? He'll go on to explain through the pages of the Bhagavad Gita how it's the most confidential of knowledge. And these are high claims. Right? These are high claims. As I started to prepare for this topic, it really struck me. It really struck me that if it's true, if this knowledge was of such a high caliber, if it was actually true that this knowledge was of such a high caliber, it would mean that at least in my own life, and maybe I suggest in the lives of some of us, it would mean that I was missing out. It would mean that I was missing out. It would mean that unless I deeply not only absorbed myself in this knowledge, one level, not only understood this knowledge, another level, not only applied this knowledge, another level, but literally embodied this knowledge. It became clear to me that to the degree that I wasn't doing these things, to that degree in my own life, I was also missing out. Transparently, my spiritual master, I was talking to someone recently. I was talking about one thing I noticed about my spiritual master. I like to be philosophical and read things and understand things and like code-breaking wisdom. Right? But what I noticed with my spiritual master, is to be very transparent with you. I could notice that he was not often so impressed with people who are able to quote this verse, quote that verse, quote this verse. And at one point I tried to understand because I thought that's quite cool, right? They can speak Sanskrit, quote this, quote that, reference this. And it became clear to me over time that the reason he was not so impressed is because he saw that there was a disconnect. The disconnect was simply that sometimes there were people who were able to quote all kinds of verses seemingly, but they weren't able to live those verses. Right? They could read a verse about being compassionate, but they themselves, they weren't very compassionate. Right? They could read a verse about being spiritual, and then they themselves were not necessarily such a good example. And I thought that was interesting. And that's why I say this last level, which is perhaps the most important level for one to get the full benefit of what this Vedic knowledge has to offer, is the embodiment. Much easier to quote a verse than to be the verse in action. But at the same time, I understood that if we were able to mold our character to these standards, what an amazing life one would lead. So let's get into this. Let's explore this. And because, to be honest with you, my current meditation, I'm not very good at this, but I'm trying to get better at this. My current meditation is not to worry about that results, right? One of the interesting things amongst the amazing, beautiful, extraordinary teachings that Krishna gives Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he says to him, dude, don't worry about the outcomes. You just do your best. They're on the battlefield and he's making that point. Don't worry about the outcomes. You do your best and be detached from the result. You do your best and then leave the result to me. And if you do that, everything will work out just fine ultimately. I'm not very good at that, but I wanted to practice. And it all goes to this particular point. It all comes back to this word Veda. the word Veda, it means knowledge, literally knowledge. And that means as you find the information in the books, or if you find the information anywhere else on this planet, and if the information is truly accurate, it means it's Veda actually. Let's start to explore. So, I was trying to think about how to structure this. By the way, I know that some of the words on here may or may not be clear to you. Don't worry about that. We'll talk for everything. This is just like an aid, okay? So there's no FOMO here. You're not missing out on anything. Let's talk through. I was trying to figure out how do we approach this topic in a way that's really accessible to our audience. And I had this realization I wanted to share with you. And it was all about food. I was around kind of dinner, lunchtime when I was having this realization. A bit subliminal, okay, but let's bear with me, right? So I was really thinking that you have a physical body, and just as you have a physical body, and there are some things which sustain the physical body, we can map that to also society. Right? Just like we have a physical body, it needs certain things, you have a social body which needs certain things. So a physical body, there's certain fuel that it has, right? There's certain things which give it fuel. So we know for a physical body, the fuel is food. If you don't eat, don't drink, etc., you're going to die very, very quickly. So just as in the physical body, there's food, and we can consider that food is of different qualities. We can consider the social body has food. The social body has a certain narrative, things that people accept to be true. Now, whether they're true or not, that's another story. But there's certain things, obviously life is about X, or life is about Y, or life is about Z. A physical body has an immune system. The immune system of the physical body is meant to keep out that which is unhealthy and to allow in that which is healthy. Same way, we have a social body. Law and order, societal norms are meant to bring into society healthy things, keep out of society unhealthy things. So when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about this concept of the fuel for the body. We eat food which is fuel for the body. Now, we also know that there are different types of food. What happens if you eat junk food? Okay, it's not good for you, issues will come, right? So just as you can have junk food, you can also have junk knowledge. Okay? You can have knowledge which is not of the right caliber. Let's take the analogy further. When I eat junk food, it has an effect upon me, okay? It may feel like I'm full, but certain things over time will start to happen to the body, just as when we don't do other things which are healthy for a particular system, you get an unhealthy outcome. So looking at that particular analogy, it became clear to me that if we look at the social body, we see that there are issues. Okay? Whether it's rising polarization. Anyone notice that right now? Right? People are much more aggressively entrenched in one position versus another. You can have people in the same family, because they didn't vote the same way, it becomes an issue. Or they don't have the same view on a particular social issue, it becomes an issue. We have an increasing mental health crisis. Anxiety, depression, so many things. A lot of misinformation. It's so interesting. How many of you have AI, ChatGPT, or any kind of apps like that right now? Raise your hands. Okay. It's very interesting. I was seeing something recently. It said that with the AI, because it's calibrated according to your own particular behaviors, it was on a podcast, there were two guys were talking, and one of them said, who's the greatest footballer? And he asked his AI, ChatGPT, he got one answer. And then his friend who asked exactly the same AI, ChatGPT, who's the greatest footballer, the ChatGPT gave him a completely different answer, right? Because it's designed to get you acting on that platform as much as possible. And before you had what's called clickbait, right? So online, there are different things to get you to click on that, go to my website, etc. Now they have what's called chat bait. So at the end, whenever you ask ChatGPT or an AI something, it has all these questions at the end. If you want, I can also give you information on X, Y, and Z to get you to continue to use those particular platforms as much as possible. So misinformation, fake news, a lot of social fragmentation that comes because the algorithm is not trying to encourage the truth. It's trying to encourage attention. Right? So we live in the attention economy. And there's a very interesting statement about this. The attention economy means that if you don't know what the product is, right? You know, you get these free apps. Oh, wow, it's amazing. They're so nice. They're such nice people. They just want to help me have a better life with AI. No. If you don't know what the product is, then you're the product. That's how it works in this modern age. If you don't know what the product is, you're the product. So we have this crisis. So much is coming in. For junk food, read junk information. Think about that. But it's not just what's happening, what we're being exposed to. The quality of the information makes a big difference. Actually, we have 3 major issues modern society is giving us, ladies and gentlemen. Number 1, the quality of the information is like junk food. So when we have information which is of low caliber, okay, that's the first issue. Because just like when you take junk food in, you're going to get unhealthy. In the same way, when we take in junk food information, low quality information, it creates an issue. But the issue doesn't stop there. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2, let's take this analogy forward. So what would you say? In the modern society, do we have too much information, too little information, or just the right amount of information? What do you think? Too much, right? That's exactly what I was thinking. Okay, so let's follow the analogy. What happens when you overload on something? Let's say you eat too much food. So let's take the average person in London. He or she gets into a habit of overeating. Okay, over time, what happens to that person? They get sick. Okay, so now you've got 2 issues. 1, the information or the food that you were taking in was of low quality in the first place. And to add to that, you're taking too much of that low quality food. You got it? Okay. So, junk food, now overeating on junk food. So we know it's going to have an effect upon the health. So the first issue is the quality of the information we have in Kali Yuga. The second issue is we have too much of the wrong information as well. But there's a third issue. It's very interesting. So, consider that this person is eating junk food and they eat too much junk food. And then to add to that, consider that this person who's eating too much junk food also has a weak digestion. Okay? Poor quality food, too much of it, and a lack of digestive power. What do you think happens to the person's digestion? Over time, it gets worse. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the issue that we have in modern society. It's analogous for every one of us. We said that Veda means knowledge, and what we have in modern society is a low quality of information, junk food information. What we have in modern society is an overload of that same information, right? You ever feel that information is coming at you from all corners, right? Everywhere you go, one website, you do a search, there's millions of links, okay? And then everyone has an opinion, isn't it? Right? In Kali Yuga, everyone's an expert, right? Because everyone's going, why are you having that kind of diet? What's wrong with you? I saw a video on this, right? I saw a podcast. Actually, the right diet is this type of diet. Everyone's an expert. It can be bewildering. So the wrong kind of information, too much of the wrong information, and the third factor is an inability to digest. The way the modern society is, do you ever feel that there's not enough time to actually process things? Yeah. That's the third issue that we have. Life is so fast, so hectic. There's so often so much going on that we don't often carve out the time to reflect and to think. These are the issues that we have in the modern society. Okay? So when we talk about the fueling of the social body, For a social body, just like for a physical body to work well, it needs the right information, right? So the right food, the right amount of it, and strong digestive power. You can aggregate that. For a social body to function, for a society to function well, we also need that. The right information, truth, wisdom, the right amount of the right information, and the ability to assimilate it. Going back to what I saw with my spiritual master, he wasn't very impressed with people who knew all these verses. I know the answer to that. I've read that book. I've read this. He wasn't so impressed because he was very much looking, have you assimilated any of this? Right? Have you become any of this? If you go out and interact with people, can they understand that there's a supreme personality of Godhead who genuinely, deeply loves and cares for them and really wants them to have the best possible life and to become fully blissful in Krishna consciousness? Can they deduce that from your behavior? It's a tall ask. So we know that there are issues. So the beautiful thing about the Vedic knowledge is you can plug it and play. This is not the kind of knowledge that you just believe in or you don't believe in. I tell you honestly, for the past, I don't know how many years, we were able to find out all kinds of things just by applying this pristine knowledge. And the way it works, or one of the ways it works, because it works in many ways, is it sometimes works in the form of a framework. I used to be into these action thriller movies, right? Really, really. And I remember there's a movie where, like an action movie, where there's a scene where one of the characters, he has to steal a diamond, right? Or, has to get through like a security system. And I remember one movie, there was a scene, and then what happens is the main character, he's wearing these infrared lenses, right? Because when you wear the infrared lenses, you can see all the infrared lasers, and he knows if he trips one of the lasers, the alarm goes off, right? You understand what I'm talking about? So, the Vedic literatures are like a lens on reality. They're like a lens on reality. They give you a framework, and when you use that framework, you can deduce the quality of something. You can see that's bona fide, that's true, that actually works. If I do that, things are going to move in a certain direction, as opposed to, I heard this particular point. That doesn't marry up with what the Vedas say. That's someone's speculation. They've actually just made that up. Or they're even well-intentioned, but they're completely wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why I found this stuff so incredibly interesting is because I understood more and more that where we are in life, every single one of us in this room, the quality of life we have, the relationships that we have, the things that we're doing, what we understand about ourselves, all of this has been woven together by thousands of millions of decisions that we've made over time. Right? We've made all these different decisions, and behind every decision there's a fund of knowledge. You believe something about reality which allows you to say yes to this option and no to this option. This is why this teaching of Bhagavad Gita as it is so transformative, is so revolutionary, because it gives you a proper understanding about reality. It allows you to be spiritually informed. You understand? Right? It allows you to be spiritually informed. So you're going to make decisions anyway, no problem. But if you have this knowledge behind you, you'll be able to make spiritually informed decisions which will lead you over time to phenomenal outcomes. Yeah? That's been my experience. And therefore, when we apply this framework of what we call the three modes of material nature to information, then we can understand that when you have information which is wrong, that's information in the mode of ignorance, okay? Lies, deceptions, etc. When you have information in what's called the mode of passion, that's information which is distorted in some way, right? It's distorted by our attachments. It's distorted by our particular biases. It's more, rather than being true information, it's more just someone's opinion. Have you ever had, be honest with me, how many of you have ever been in a situation you're trying to convince someone of something which is obviously true, but you can see it's going nowhere because it's not that it's not true, And it's not that what you're saying isn't logical, it's just they just don't want to believe it. Anyone have that experience, or is it just me and my family? Okay, you understand what I'm talking about, right? This is how it goes, ladies and gentlemen. This is because when I'm too attached to something, I can't see the truth of it. You see how it works? And that's implied by the teachings that Krishna gave Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra over 5,000 years ago. He explained this framework. Because what he does is he explains, knowledge in this category is like this. When it's in this category, it's like this. When it's in this category, it's like that. So when you understand this framework, it's just like putting that lens on. Oh, now I put the lens on, I can see, oh, there's the tripwire, right? I can navigate life much more effectively. It's so powerful. In the future, what you will find is that if they do mass investigation of knowledge, and if they do it properly in an unbiased way, you will see that the modern society that we live in will continually come to exactly the same conclusions that you'll find in the Vedic literatures. And I put my word on it. I've tested this. I'll give you one example before we move on, because I keep seeing this everywhere I go. How many of you know about the Ayurvedic clock in terms of times of day? Anyone know anything about that? Okay. So in Ayurveda, the most ancient system of healthcare, right, the Vedic system of healthcare, it points out that there are different times in the day. And it says that those different times of the day are influenced by different types of energy. And so, without going into all the details, I want to cover a few other things before we open up the Q&A. Very interesting. Ayurveda says there's a certain kind of energy called kapha, the kapha dosha, right? It's a certain type of day, and it's so kapha is 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., right? That's the morning kapha period, and the evening kapha period is 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Now, kapha, of the three types of energy, kapha is the stronger energy, because the kapha energy, it relates to earth and water, and they're the more gross elements. So, according to Ayurveda, your body does not have equal strength throughout the day. At certain times in the day, your body's stronger, actually, and at certain times in the day, your body is less strong. Did you know that? Isn't it interesting? I came across an article. I can't remember, I think it was the beginning of this year or end of last year. Modern scientists have found, feel free to look this up. Everything I say to you, feel free to check. Modern scientists have found that actually when you do exercise at certain times of the day, your body's stronger and more resilient. And guess what times that they found your body's more resilient and stronger? It correlates to the times which are given in that Ayurvedic system. Right? Again, don't take my word for it. You can check that out. They found that your body's stronger, you're able to get more from exercise at particular times in the day. That knowledge was understood in Ayurveda thousands of years ago. Thousands of years. So what people come to empirically, this has already been stated over 5,000 years ago. And this is one of many examples. Let's move on. So, the problem that we face, as we said, distorted information, like having junk food, right? Food which is, it's there, but there's not much nutrient to it. Then, information overload, too much information. And then, an inability to digest all the stuff that's coming to us. And therefore, it puts us on the back foot. It means that we're not in the strongest state to navigate life, to understand life, and to reach the goal of life. Okay? So what we need, and what the Vedas do, and which is incredibly revolutionary, one point by itself, what the Vedas do is that they really help us to understand what you don't need is more information. Right? What we need actually is the right wisdom. You understand? And this is phenomenal. It's like changing everything upstream. I'm always working on these different projects, and we were doing some research about how people approach life. What you'll see in the modern system is that people act first, think later, which actually correlates to the mode of passion. The Vedic system, because of a higher caliber, it says actually you should understand the truth first, and then act on that understanding. And so if you first of all have proper knowledge, look at the sequence. First of all, it's sambandha gyan, which means proper knowledge, the knowledge of relationship. Your relationship to God, your relationship to community, your relationship to reality, your relationship to your own happiness. You're first of all meant to understand sambandha gyan, proper wisdom, to see things in their proper position. Then on the basis of that sambandha gyan, then you come to what's called abhideya. Abhideya means application, practice, engagement. Like, so you do something, but you do something on the basis of that proper knowledge. So sambandha gyan, part 1. Then abhideya, part 2. And then if you have the proper knowledge and you act on that proper knowledge, then you come through, not just to conclusions, you come through to the proper conclusion, which is called prayojana. So you can see that because that's the natural order of life, the moment that order gets distorted, your happiness gets distorted. The moment that order gets distorted, it brings up issues in our lives that we did not have to go through. And that's what's really painful in the modern society. If people do not get this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, if people do not get this Vedic knowledge, and not just get the knowledge, if they don't act on the knowledge, if it's not made clear to them that this information that you're being given is not something to just read and, oh, that's nice. If you live on this according to this information, you can't imagine how much your life will be much better. You can't imagine the upgrade in your life. You can't imagine the upgrade in your consciousness. You can't begin to imagine the upgrade in your happiness. All of our issues, ladies and gentlemen, the issues have come upstream. We think it's these other people who are giving me a hard time. No, the issue came upstream. It started with ignorance as opposed to knowledge. And this class is to really tune us into the power and the opportunity if we get this right going forward. Okay, so wisdom is what we're looking for. And it's interesting because wisdom acts like a filter. When I was meditating, it became really clear to me. If you have wisdom, it allows you to filter out the truth from everything else. There's a very, very interesting verse. When I first came across this verse, it didn't make sense to me. There's a verse in a Vedic literature called the Sri Upanishad. Because, people in the path of bhakti, we're trying to be spiritual, we're trying to know about the highest goals and stuff. And then you get hit with this verse. And in this verse of the Sri Upanishad, it says that one must understand nescience and transcendence side by side. And it didn't make sense to me. What are you talking about? We're supposed to transcend the material. We're meant to, it's all about God. It didn't make any sense. Then I started to look into it, and it became so much clearer to me. The way it works is like this. See, it's dangerous if you only know what you want. Sounds strange, doesn't it? But it's true. It's dangerous to only know what you want. So I want this. That's good, but it's not the whole story. You have to also know the things that you don't want and the things that you must avoid. There are many people in life who had the 50% knowledge issue. They knew what they wanted, but they didn't know what to avoid. So they're pursuing the things that they want, and that's good, as long as it's obviously healthy, goals. They're pursuing the things that they want. But you know what's going to stop them? It's not the fact that they're pursuing the things that they don't. The issue isn't the things that they're pursuing which they want. If the goals are good, that's not the issue. The issue is what's creeping into their life space. While they're pursuing the things that they want, which is called the poverty, things that enter into their life space which are going to cause that person trouble. Right? Because Maya's like that. Maya, the force of illusion, that which is not, she's got a number of very clever tactics. You see? So I'm a bhakta, it's about Krishna, Krishna KC, forever. I'm pursuing all these things that I want. What I'm not noticing is the things that I don't want, the things to avoid. So while I'm pursuing my goal, slowly there's things entering into my life space that I don't want, but it's going to cause me some trouble. So it's not just enough to know about the transcendence, which is the goal. We have to also know about the nescience to stop that creeping into our life. There's a story about, I don't remember the story fully, but I'll give you the essence of it. There's a story about a man and he's meditating, and it seems to go well, but then there's some kind of mouse that's disturbing his meditation. So what does he decide to do? He decides, I need to get a cat, because if I get the cat, then the cat will stop the mouse harassing me and I'll be able to meditate in peace. So he gets the cat, right? But then the cat, is now, causing him some trouble. So I need to get a dog to scare away the cat, okay? Like that. And then the dog, to maintain the dog, the dogs, they need feeding at certain times, etc., etc. So then he has to do something else to maintain the dog. And before you know it, his so-called goal of doing some peaceful meditation, it's gone. Because he complicated his life by allowing all kinds of other things in. He knew what he wanted originally. I wanted to meditate. He forgot what you don't want. You don't want complexity. So all the material things came in through the back door. Therefore, as long as we are in this world, the Sri Ishopanishad perfectly says you need to understand both transcendence and nescience. You need to understand those side by side. You need to understand what you're going for, and you need to understand the things to avoid so that your life space doesn't get hijacked or sabotaged by Maya. Interesting point. So this knowledge, it acts like a filter. If you have Vedic knowledge, it gives you a filter, it gives you a lens through which you can evaluate anything else that you read or hear, and you consider, yeah, that's in line with our Vedic knowledge, no problem, it's correct. Or this, no, this is actually inaccurate, therefore it's wrong. I wanted to give you one or two examples. There's an incredible, so there's literatures which are in pursuance of the Vedic version. That means they're derived from the Vedic understanding. And, sometimes the Vedic literatures are given in what's called a sutra form. So they'll explain something in a very simple, concise way, but you can unpack it and gain tremendous benefit. So there's a type of literature called the Niti Shastra. And one famous author of the Niti Shastra is Chanakya. Wonderful statement. I was unpacking this for years. It was just so useful. He says, everything unnatural is an enemy. 5 words. Everything unnatural is an enemy. One sentence. But that sentence is like a filter. It allows you to filter out so many different things. If you look at that statement, what he's basically saying is the more that you go away from being natural, what happens to your life? It becomes worse. You have all kinds of additional issues that would otherwise you could completely avoid. I wanted to give some examples of that. So, everything unnatural is an enemy. Looking at it socially, when plastics first started to be, I thought, wow, you've got this like cheap containers, easy to use. Wow, and you ask people, if you speak to the average person, yes, modern society, we're advancing, right? We're advancing. If you look at it through the Vedic literature, it points out that what you consider advancement often has all kinds of other side effects that you're going to pay for and you don't even know it. And just look at how this works. It can become insidious because you do something here and it looks wonderful. It's having all these secret side effects on you and you don't know about the effects it's having on you. The effects may show up 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later. So you may not even realize what I did here is the thing that's causing me all this issue later on. So I wanted to give you some examples of that. So, and when I was doing the research, I wanted to make sure we get the sources. So for example, plastics. Modern society, you can get, take away food and plastics, etc. And it looks, and everyone says it's amazing, it's convenient. But now we know that plastics, there's so many oceans which have plastic waste, and we think, okay, that's bad. But we think it's not, but to be honest, most people think, that's bad, but you know what? I'm not living in the ocean, I'm fine, right? It doesn't affect me, so, I'm okay about it, right? I'm sorry for the fish, but, hey, that's progress, baby. People think like that. What they don't understand is, no, we pay for it. So, according to the Food and Drug Administration, the National Institute for Health and Environmental Protection Agency, plastics leach chemicals into food. Right? That means the containers that we use. The plastics leach chemicals into food which lead to hormonal disruption, reproductive issues, developmental problems, and increased cancer risk. Again, don't take my word for it. When I was looking at the research, what they found is, and I do this, so, you know, by the way, I'm not trying to scare everyone, but I want to make it really bring it home. When people use plastics, and for example, when we microwave food, some of that plastic, generally the plastic, it leaches into the food, so we ingest it. There have been studies which have found people often have plastic in their genitalia. They call it nanoplastics, because it's ingested in the body and then it enters into the system, you see? So, again, it's a very, very powerful type of knowledge, because what you notice is we can do something here and we don't understand the effect it's having elsewhere. And then later on, if I have some issue elsewhere, what they said in modern society, they'll say, oh, it's just coincidence, you know? It's just, as scientists, we haven't figured out why that's there. But the Vedas don't say that. Understand this very carefully. The Vedas don't say that. They understand things at the level of principle. The more you mess with the divine order, you create other issues that will happen on an individual level and on a societal level, right? So that's one example. Non-stick cookware. When I first moved into my own place, I thought, wow, non-stick cookware, right? I won't have to scrub the dishes anymore. It's like, it'll be easy, just slide off like that. Let's look at this. According to the research by the Environmental Protection Agency and other groups, the chemicals from non-stick coating, they can leach into the food during cooking, which can have effects on liver damage, thyroid disease, high cholesterol, kidney disease, immune suppression. Okay? So you see a pattern, something that we're calling convenient, that is an advancement. We're not always aware that that's going to have some downstream effects. And it's not downstream effects on someone else, it's downstream effects on us. So just examples. Shift work, right? So, you're doing shift work. Okay, I'm awake when people are asleep, but it's okay. I get my 8 hours in the daytime, etc., etc. Check this out. According to research from the International Agency for Research on Cancer and the World Health Organization, they found that working against the natural circadian rhythm, which is the natural body clock, it's actually now classified as a carcinogen, which is cancer causing. It says it can have increased cancer risk, metabolic disorders, sleep disruption, mental health issues. Okay? Now, we took this all from that one statement. Everything unnatural is an enemy. That means the more people move away from the natural order, the more potential it has to create other issues which we as a society would otherwise not have to deal with. And therefore, honestly speaking, I want to be very honest with you. Sometimes in the community of Bhakti, when people they'll hear a statement. You hear this many times. Simple living and high thinking. Everyone's like, yeah, Prabhupada, calm down. It's okay, right? I got this, right? I'm doing quite well. It's all right, it's right. I understand. That's for someone else. It's for the brahmacharis. It's for the sannyasis, right? They need that. I'm okay. I'm doing, it's all right. Like that. It's okay. We think like that. We don't actually, no, he's talking to us. Simple living, high thinking. There's a way of actually living these. The reason why it's often missed is because when the Vedic literature gives information, it's information in a higher mode. And this is really important. What it means, when you get information in a higher mode, it means it will not give you short-term results. It will give you long-term results. It's just like many of you went to university, right? University doesn't give you short-term results. In the short term, you're in debt, right? That's what university gives you. It gives you a headache, you're in debt, you've got teachers you don't like. That's just me, sorry, I'm going on a tangent. Sorry about it, sorry. I shouldn't bring my own traumas into the environment, sorry. But you get the point, I think you understand where I'm coming from. It's this knowledge, and that's why people miss it. That's why people miss the value of scriptural knowledge, is because it works on a different frequency. All right, let's see if I give one. Anyway, you get the point, so I'm not going to give so much into the social media example. But just the frequency is different. So people think, oh, it's not, my friend's doing this, they seem to be getting immediate results. Why am I doing this instead? Yeah, your friend will get the immediate results, but they're going to pay for it, right? So it's like buy now, pay later. That's the trajectory of what's called the mode of passion, right? You can have immediate gratification, but in the long term, you're going to pay you're going to pay more for that. Whereas in the mode of goodness, you're going to first put some effort in. You're going to have to pay something for that. But in the long term, it gives you consistent, better long-term outcomes. So get this point. If you remember nothing else, understand knowledge is not equal. Knowledge has a frequency. So when you're dealing with Vedic knowledge, it's dealing with goodness upwards, right? Goodness, and then beyond that, pure goodness. That's why it works differently. It's not like the knowledge in this world, which is more passionate and more ignorant. That's why it's different. And that's why it's easy to play down the quality of this Vedic knowledge. So, what does it mean to live in the mode of goodness? Okay, there's studies also, again, going back to the Vedic knowledge and the truth of this knowledge. There's secular studies, get this, which have found that they've done studies to find how much fulfillment people get by different types of giving. Okay, let's look at this in more detail. Actually, let's go to, I'm going to jump around on this because I want to just make this point about giving. So, research by Harvard, they looked at what's called pro-social giving, and they found that when people spent money on others, the happiness they experienced was greater than if they spent that same money on themselves. Think about that, right? Now, of course, that doesn't mean you do it recklessly and done in a way where you're not even maintaining yourself. This is having taken care of themselves as a baseline. The research showed that selfless giving created a greater degree of fulfillment in people. And we all know this instinctively. How many of you have ever done some kind of service where like you were doing some food distribution to the homeless or anything like that? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you distinctly noticed that when you were serving someone and you were able to do it without a motive, it was just, I just want to help these people. How many of you noticed that you actually gained a certain kind of quality of contentment that you don't normally experience? Raise your hands. Okay. That's the point. That's the point. That's been found by external research. And that, again, is already there in the Vedic knowledge over 5,000 years old. You see? It's a different caliber of knowledge. That's what it's actually saying. When Prabhupada came to London, to the UK, and they asked him, why have you come? He said, I came to give you what you've forgotten. He said to the British, he said, when you came to India, you stole everything. Right? But you left the most valuable thing behind, so I came to London to give you the thing that you left behind. Like that. That's what he actually said to them. And he's right. He's right. It's exactly what's going on. So, research by Harvard, there's research on neuroscience, selfless acts activates the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine, which is a hormone, for the helper's high. Pro-social spending on others leads to greater well-being. And then compare that to what's called transactional giving. That means I'm going to give to you, but you better do something for me, right? I scratch your back, you better scratch mine. Okay, so get this. Stanford University research. Expecting reciprocity transforms giving into a transaction, diminishing its intrinsic sense of joy. Think about that, right? Behavioral economics. External motivators, so doing things for external results, they actually minimize the intrinsic motivation and they therefore reduce the inherent pleasure that you gain from giving. So all of these pieces of research, they all align with what the Vedas say. The Vedas say that we're built to give, we're built to serve, and it's not just built for it, but because it's real, because it's our real nature, when we do that, we actually gain a deep sense of joy. Okay, I want to make sure we leave some time for questions. I'm not going to show you this video, but I was going to show you this video. That's my little disclaimer. So, in this video, I wanted to share it because it was interesting what it actually talks about. So it's very interesting. This guy, he does YouTube videos, and the whole thing is about why you should stop watching YouTube, right? And I second that, by the way. I'm into that. So what does he explain? He explains that what happens on YouTube, people consume a lot of self-help content, right? Right? They're on YouTube, how can I get my six-pack, whatever it is. They want to consume all this content. But what the research finds is that most people, when they consume the content, they don't actually do anything about it. They don't embody it. And you know what they found? This is interesting. In his video, especially from midway through the video, what they found in the research is that if you consume this content and you don't pay for it, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to process it, you don't have to apply it, because you've got that content for nothing, because you didn't have to pay a price with time, attention, whatever it is, because you didn't have to apply it, do something for it, the tendency is it will be useless for you. And then they talk about how do you actually gain the real benefit from the knowledge. And you check the video out. In the video it says if you want to actually gain the benefit from self-help knowledge, you first have to pay a price for it. It doesn't necessarily mean monetary price. You have to be paying attention, you have to pay something, it has to cost you something. If it costs you something, if you pay a price for it first, you're then much more able to take that knowledge, use it, and actually you'll embody it. Now, the reason why I wanted to share that is because that concept of first paying a price before you get the result, it comes from the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna explains to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, activities in the mode of goodness, it begins like poison. You start by paying a price first, and then you'll actually gain benefit. So that pattern is an eternal pattern. It's how Krishna has made the world. So when people follow that pattern, you want to do something, roll your sleeves up and pay the price first, and then you'll get the long-term benefit. But if you take the opposite approach, you just try to enjoy now, you'll pay much more over the long term. So being very transparent with you, sometimes when I see people doing things, all I do is I look, what mode are they approaching this activity in? And by just observing the mode that they're approaching the activity in, I can predict the long-term outcome of what they're doing. Because it always follows Krishna's plan. I want to give you one caveat though. Sometimes people are doing things the wrong way and it seems to work out. This is important because if you don't get the full understanding, you'll think, oh, he said that, but I saw this and it seemed to work out for them. When you see people doing the wrong thing and still getting a result, they're getting the result now of their previous proper behavior. You understand? That's why it gets confusing to people. This guy's stealing, he's lying, he's cheating, he seems to be getting away with it. No, he's stealing and lying and cheating now, so that means in the future he'll get some negative reaction. But the good reaction he's getting now is because in the past, in the previous life or early in this life, he behaved properly. You see? Without Vedic knowledge, you'll really fall for the complete ridiculous misconception that that good guys finish last or good girls finish last. It's never happened in the history of creation. Yeah? It's not that the teachings are wrong. It's that our perception is wrong, right? Because at any moment in time, you're seeing the person's activity now, and you're seeing the person's reactions for previous activity. Both things are going on. So sometimes people think someone's a president. This dude's a president. He's lying, right? This dude's a president. He does this wrong, he does that wrong, but things seem to work out for him because of his previous piety. You understand how it works? Without the vision, we'll fall into the trap. And just look at how this works. If I have the wrong conception, if I think that behaving properly means I'm just going to lose out, then I change my behavior to behave improperly, and I think, well, I get away with that, right? I'm behaving improperly, everything seems to be working out. I don't understand, longer down the line, you're going to have to pay for all of this. You see? But because it's further down the line, we lose our understanding because we don't see the connection between the cause and the effect. You see? I did something 20 years ago, and I think that was an isolated incident. No, the bill hits me 20 years down the line. Yeah? So from this we can understand there's two things we're meant to do. We're meant to do things wisely and do things practically. So you're practical and you're also wise. If you follow that formula in life, things will compound. And you'll get tremendous positive long-term outcomes. So never think that good people finish last, right? It's never worked like that in the history of humanity. I'll just say one or two last things and then we'll open up for questions. So, So we need to really think about this. What do we consume? We want to consume wisdom as opposed to junk food information. The Vedic knowledge, that is, the Vedic literature is of that caliber. Number two, by that knowledge we can then filter out what's true and what's false. Interesting fact. How many of you are parents? Raise your hands. Okay. So in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna and Arjuna are speaking, Krishna tells Arjuna, you just act, right? You do your duty, do your best, do not worry about the outcomes, leave the outcomes to me. There's a study on parenting. Get this. There's a study on parenting. They compared one group of parents who praised their children for the results. They compared that group to another group of parents and children with parents who had a different parenting style. This second group, they praised their children for the effort. I really saw you tried your best. Mom and dad, we're so proud of you. Long-term outcomes. The children who were praised for the results, they would often play it safe in life because their identity had become attached to the result. That means every time those children, now adults, whenever they failed in something, what happens to their self-esteem? It took a crash. I've failed, therefore I am a failure. It became an identity, it became a label. The children, now adults, whose parents had actually encouraged them based upon their effort. Mom and dad, we saw you tried so hard, etc., etc. Those children, they would always try their best whether they failed or didn't fail because their failure and their success never became an identity. The identity was connected to what they could actually control, which was doing the best that they could do. And get this, the side effect is, well, let me ask you, which group do you think got better results over the long term? First group or the second group? It's the second group. Because everyone knows, if you're not scared to fail, and if failure doesn't destroy your identity, you can keep trying with determination, and over time you end up getting better results anyway. So again, that principle that Krishna taught Arjuna is a principle of life. It's these things, Veda means knowledge. It means this is how the reality works. You understand what I'm trying to say? What you get in Bhagavad Gita, you get all the laws of how reality works. And if you're intelligent enough to follow them, you get the best possible outcomes in literally every area in which you apply them. Powerful stuff. So, now let's bring this to the conclusion. Therefore, we now need to understand what's the conclusion of all this Vedic knowledge. Let's just jump here. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text number 15, Krishna says, Vedescha sarve aham eva vedyo vedantakrit vedavit eva chaham. By all this Vedic knowledge, there's one goal. According to the Bhagavad Gita, which is the foremost literature in all the Vedic culture or civilization, by all the Vedas, one is meant to understand, know, and love Krishna. That's the goal of the Vedic knowledge. That means that everything can be adjusted in the most powerful way if we're using life to move towards the right direction and the right goal. And specifically within that, very, very interesting, it gives the formula, the only and the unique formula for all deep happiness, all deep lasting eternality, wisdom, and bliss. There's one eternal formula for contentment, and that is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is considered the ripened fruit of all the Vedic literature, the essence of the Vedic literature. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 6, chapter 2, text number 6, it says, Ahoituki apritiyata yayatma suprasidati. It says, for you to feel completely satisfied, one has to engage in service to the Lord, and that service to the Lord has to be unmotivated and uninterrupted. Right? Ahoituki apritiyata yayatma suprasidati. In order to completely satisfy the self. For us to be completely satisfied. Not stimulated, not, I got a gift and it was all right, or I watched a movie and it was okay, but a deep joy, a deep fulfillment. And again, please do not believe what I'm saying. Plug in and play. This is something that you can test in your own life. And then when that aggregates, when you have a critical mass of people doing that, then the same thing that works for the individual body works for the social body. Here we have Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter 18, text number 9. It says here, this is a prayer by a great saint named Prahlad Maharaj. He says, let there be good fortune throughout the universe. He says, and may all envious persons be pacified. May all living entities, now we're looking at the collective, may all living entities become calm. How do they become calm? By practicing bhakti yoga, which is Krishna consciousness. But by accepting devotional service, they will think of each other's welfare. If we engage collectively in devotional service, it changes our mentality. We naturally are concerned because I know everyone I see is my brother and my sister, and I am my brother and sister's keeper. Okay? For by accepting devotional service, they will think of each other's welfare. Therefore, let us all engage in the service of the Supreme Transcendence, Lord Sri Krishna, and always remain absorbed in thought of Him. So in conclusion, there's a science of how to be truly happy. In fact, there is a science of everything. And believe me, you're practically, well, all of you here, you're of Indian descent. This is your tradition, right? This is your tradition. Honestly speaking, practically, I've seen in the world right now, no one understands what's in these books. No, they don't actually understand what's being given to them. Because if you understood what you've been given, you would mine the treasure chest, right? I've been studying this for over 20 years. All these so-called breakthroughs that you see in life, they've already been given in your own tradition. They're either there explicitly stated, or they're there stated in the form of a principle. Just like that statement I gave you, Chanakya, everything unnatural is an enemy. It's giving you the principle. Right, that the more you go away from being natural, the more you make your life difficult and create all kinds of additional challenges in your own life. So sometimes the Vedas will explain things like a sutra, like it gives you just like a one short, concise statement. Sometimes it will go into some details about it. But this is the ultimate type of knowledge. Yeah? So we want to encourage you, Vedesya Sarve Aham Eva Vedyo, to really make your life easier. And to those who are on the path of spiritual life, believe me, let me be very clear. Often you will find that those on the path of bhakti, their life is much more challenging than it needs to be. Don't think that your life is challenging just because Krishna made it difficult. In many cases, we don't apply things so well. You see? That's what's happening in many cases. We're not so expert in how to apply. Therefore, in the areas that we apply things go as well as they can. In the areas where we don't apply things, we create extra difficulties for ourselves that the Supreme Personality of Godhead did not want us to have to deal with, but we open the door to that by the misapplication. So the solution is a few things. Because the goal is Krishna, we want to encourage you, try to chant the holy names of Krishna. You see? I'll tell you one reason why, connected to this topic. When you chant the names of Krishna, Vidya Vadu Jivanam, actually the chanting gives you knowledge. You see? The chanting will give you knowledge in a number of ways. You'll hear something and you'll understand it, one way. Number two, you'll read something and you'll understand its real significance, because you can read the books and you can miss what's actually on the page of those books. So if you chant, when you read, you'll see what you read differently, right? It will tune you in. You'll see, oh, hold on. You'll see the significance of what you're actually reading, okay? So one is to chant, and number two is to read. So the takeaways, the practical takeaways, number one, if you can, try to chant. And if you're chanting already, try to chant with more quality, right? Because the knowledge, the chanting is the source of all transcendental knowledge as well. So chant properly. And number two, try to read regularly. Yeah? And you'll find within the books, there's a treasure chest. It can change everything. And it will, if to the extent that we apply it, it can change literally every single arena of your life and just upgrade it in ways that you can't even begin to imagine. Okay, so I wanted to stop there and say thank you for helping me to appreciate some of the the factors of knowledge and the importance of this literature. And I'd love to open up for any questions, comments, and then what we'll do is we'll have something to eat together afterwards. Is that okay?
Yeah, just anyone has a question, I've got a mic. Just make sure that you
Okay. So, any comments, questions, corrections, challenges, donations? No, joke. That was a joke. That was a joke.
Thank you so much for your amazing talk. Really appreciate it. I think you kind of answered my question towards your end in your conclusion, but considering it's Lord Chaitanya's Parents' Day on Tuesday,
Yes.
I just wondered if you could share a little bit about how we can access his mercy to really gain this knowledge. You touched on it at the end in making sure that we're chanting to access the knowledge, but what kind of meditation or prayer can we have specifically on this day to gain this his blessings? It's
a wonderful question. So on Tuesday, we have our Gaurapanim festival. So Gaurapanim is the appearance day of the most merciful incarnation of God, who appeared on the earth just 500 years ago. It's very significant, so recent. And his name was Lord Chaitanya. He's predicted in a number of Vedic literatures, right? In a number of Vedic literatures. And what does he do? He comes to give everyone, he actually comes to give everyone love of God. That's actually what he comes to give. Namo Mahavanyaya Krishna Prem Pradayate, Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gora Tvashe Namaha. He gives something to everyone, whether they're qualified or unqualified, makes no difference. So the consideration when he comes is that no one's qualified in Kali Yuga, in this age, because everyone's got so many bad habits. The consideration is that no one's qualified. So there's two options. When you meet a situation where no one's qualified, option number one, no one gets the gift. He chose option number two. Option number two is no one's qualified, so just give it to everyone indiscriminately. So what we can do as a meditation on Tuesday, which is the appearance of Lord Chaitanya, first of all, many devotees will fast. That's an offering of austerity to the Lord in that sense. But what we can do is actually the greatest way we can do it is to accept the gift. That's the greatest way that we can please Lord Chaitanya. Accept the gift in our life and share the gift with others. So what is that gift? We can give people the holy name. There'll be a Harinam procession where people collectively will go down the streets of central London. They'll leave from the ISKCON London temple and do that chanting. It's a very wonderful thing. So you're giving the holy name to other people. You're giving it to yourself at the same time. And often they'll distribute books. So if you can accept the gift, going back to what we said, chanting, if we can, regular chanting and some regular reading. Wherever you are, whatever you can start doing is good, is eternally to your benefit. If you can do that, you'll see your life will change for the better. No doubt. Absolutely 100% guaranteed. You see? So that's how we can do it. And the meditation is also on that particular day. We can have a meditation of gratitude. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. When people practice this teaching properly, without going into all the details, if you practice it properly, you can understand things so much more with greater clarity. You have greater clarity on your own life, greater clarity on everyone else around you, greater clarity on what you should be doing, right? Your happiness will be much deeper, right? You have a much deeper sense of joy. You have also much more strength. You become a lot stronger internally. The things that used to disturb you will not disturb you in the future as you progress and evolve in that way. Yeah. So on Tuesday, the meditation will be gratitude. That's one meditation, and accepting the gift that Lord Chaitanya has given us, and we accept it by accepting the chanting, accepting the reading of spiritual literature, and sharing that with other people. Okay, does that answer your question? Thank you for your question. Yes, any other questions or comments?
Thank you so much for a wonderful class.
Thank you for coming, Ash. Good to see you.
You've mentioned that chanting and reading are very good, but can you also tell us about listening to classes? And sometimes with good spiritual teachers, you can really pick up some gems which actually makes your understanding better. Yeah. So, you got to find time for these sort of things, but where do you put that into your timetable as well?
Yeah, so if you read and if you follow what the reading says, you'll also hear. You see? So it's like this. Someone has written down some instructions. You need to get from where you are to central London. Okay, someone's written down the instructions. So you read the instructions. Okay, that's good. But if you actually really take on board what you're reading, you're going to start following the directions that you're reading and you're going to actually get somewhere. So the reading itself will inspire application. Yep. An application, when it's done properly, it will transform who you are as a person. So going back to what we said at the beginning of the session, so it's not just hearing or reading. If the sign that we're doing it properly is we're inspired, we live differently, and we actually become different, right? So the process is actually has the power to transform us. It will make us into a different person. You will become literally the spiritual version of yourself. Yeah. So hearing and reading, they overlap, because what we're hearing is the same philosophy that we're reading. But at the same time, the special quality of hearing is when we hear and read together, we gain the collective benefit of everyone else's realization. You see? So it is important. It is actually important to read, and it's important to hear. So there's a seminar. It's actually from my spiritual master. It's a 2-part seminar called Scriptural Study and Preaching. He says, what you read affects your ability to hear properly, and your hearing also affects your ability to read well. So they have a symbiotic relationship with each other, you know? Okay. Is that okay? Thank you for your question. Any other question or comment?
Hare Krishna. So my question was around, you mentioned...
Good to see you, Harsha, by the way.
Nice to see you. Yeah, nice to see. My question was around, you mentioned shift work.
Yeah.
So that kind of I wrote that down, like it stood
I
out.
need to write that down. I want to zap people.
I know. So I was just thinking, like, in this modern age now, work is very demanding.
Yes.
So work isn't just 8 hours; it's 12 hours a day. It's non-stop. You've got Teams messages with emails, with meetings. It's just non-stop, and sometimes it creeps into weekends as well. So how do we control, as a society? How do we control that as we go forward? And I know in my world, even resources are now tight, so that people are not recruiting anymore.
Yeah.
So they want more. They want to squeeze more out the people that are in the work.
Yeah. So consider this a pyramid. 3 factors. First and foremost, everything has to be adjusted by Krishna's involvement. What we're looking for is divine intervention, right? So again, the pyramid, 3 factors. Number 1, Krishna-centeredness. Okay, whatever I'm doing, try and keep Krishna in. And if I chant and read regularly, Krishna will be in my life. You know, like that. So that's the first. That's the apex of the pyramid. Number two, very, very important, wisdom, to be wise, right? So that means, because in order to act properly, you have to see the situation clearly. And this wisdom allows you to make choices, to make decisions. We're always having to make some opportunity costs, right? We're always having to balance. I'm going to do a bit more of this and a bit less of this, right? So the wisdom allows me to balance. And the third factor, which is often what I think many spiritual people miss, practical. Be practical, you see? So if it's Krishna-centered and it's wise and it's practical, then it gives you some, it allows you to have some endurance. So let's apply this to an example. Okay, so someone, people aren't hiring, etc. So at the same time, you have a wife and family. Okay, so we have to do the best. We have to get the best kind of work we can, given the job market. I may not be able to get my perfect job right now. Okay, but I'm going to choose something which is going to allow me to take care of my duties and also to maintain my Krishna-conscious ashram, right? Because I'm married, a Grahasta ashram. So Krishna's in the center. At the same time, it's wise, right? Because wise means we do the best out of, we get the best out of the bad bargain. Okay, they're not hiring, there aren't that many jobs, but what's available and what's the best of what's available that I can get right now. So it's Krishna-centered, it's wise, and it's still practical. It's not like, they're not hiring and I can't get something which perfectly fits me, so I'm going to stay unemployed. No. You've got a wife and family, right? Yeah, so it has to be Krishna-centered and wise and practical. You see? If you miss any part of the triangle, that's where issues come up, right? Some people, they're practical and wise, there's no Krishna centeredness. They don't get the eternal benefit. Some people, it's Krishna conscious and it's wise, but it's not practical. So therefore, these other issues come into their life. Issues around their physical health, issues around their social health, issues around their emotional health. And then who do they blame? Oh, I'm trying to be Krishna conscious. You know, why is God doing this to me? It's like, dude, get a job. Like, what's wrong with you? You understand? It's got to hit all three parameters for it to be lasting. Do you understand? So some people are Krishna conscious and wise, but they're not practical. Some people are wise and practical, but they're not Krishna conscious. Some people are Krishna conscious and they're practical, but they're not wise. So they don't follow Krishna's formula in that area of life. And so in that area of life, they're going to hit some challenges. So we follow the triangle. Make sense? Thank you. Okay. Yes.
My question is almost on the same lines as, so we're all born with intelligence, and then obviously we're living in a world where things are moving so fast. How do we actually become wise with the wisdom that exists? But then I think if you talk about 50 years back, 100 years back, 200 years back, there were a lot of, the wisdom still existed. People were still wise. But I think every 20 years, there'll be some kind of, changes that will be happening, industrial revolution, IT revolution, revolutions will happen. So how do we actually kind of, still kind of, stay wise by having the understanding of what the wisdom was kind of, given to us, and utilize that and then stay wise and continue living that way?
Great question. So I'm going to answer it by approaching it in a different way. I hear your question. I'm going to throw out a question which is going to answer your question. The question, and we've mentioned this over some years, the question you should all consider for yourselves is, how do you kill a culture? How do you kill a culture? How do you kill Vedic culture? The way you kill Vedic culture is the following. You have something which is incredibly valuable. So one generation have both the knowledge and then the culture. But they don't understand why this knowledge is important. Then what will happen is the next generation, they'll have the culture, but they won't have the knowledge. And what they're going to do is they're going to say to Mum and Dad, why do we do this? And Mum and Dad are not going to have any answers because Mum and Dad didn't know the answer. So they're going to tell their kids, it's just a tradition. We do it. And then the kid's going to think, you know what, I can't say that at school. I can't say that in the playground. When my friends ask me, why in your religion or why in your culture do you do this? I'm not going to be able to say that's just how we've done it. They're going to think, you guys don't know what you're talking about. So you see how the culture gets killed. So at one level, there was the knowledge and the culture. So the understanding, and that was expressed through culture. Then over time, when people forget why they're meant to do what they're meant to do, then you just have the culture. And then the children born of that culture are intelligent. Going back to what you said, they're intelligent. The sign of intelligence is curiosity. Mum, Dad, why do we do this? Mum, Dad, why do we worship that? Mum, Dad, why do we read this? Mum, Dad, when they do that ceremony, what's the meaning of that? And they get no answers. So what happens after a while, when they don't get enough answers for a long enough time, they think, therefore, there's no reason. They didn't give me a reason. So at first it's, no one gave me a reason, and then it's, there must be no reason. And after a while, because there's no reason, it makes no difference if I don't follow any of this stuff. That's how you kill a culture. So then, in order to preserve it, you have to reverse engineer. And that's what the books of His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, that's what they do. It's reverse engineering. You can revive the entire spiritual culture by reinvigorating people as to a clear understanding. This is what you do, this is why you do it. And making it clear, this is the outcome that you're going to get by following. So when people understand the full ecosystem of wisdom, this is what we do, this is why we do it, and this is what happens as a result. Then if you revive that entire system, then everything will flourish. And when it flourishes this time, it will never be able to be killed again because the roots are strong. Everyone in the culture knows. I know exactly why we do that, right? I know why this knowledge is superior to just stuff that people are saying on social media. It's not an idea. It's not, oh, we just believe in stuff. No, I can explain to you scientifically. And interestingly enough, this is what Krishna tells Arjuna. He says, Adhyatma Vidya Vidyanam. He says, of sciences, I am the supreme science of self-realization. So we can reinvigorate this by the chanting, by the reading, by the understanding in congregation. Then we get a full understanding. And when knowledge matures, it manifests as conviction. When conviction matures, it manifests as pure spiritual realization. And therefore you have a person who embodies the teachings, lives the teachings, and has realized the teachings. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Thank you for your question. Okay, so we'll stop there. It's down to the organizers.
It's going to be quick. The recent
Yep.
news is very worrying, all the teenagers, lot of teenagers coming out of in universities, they can't find jobs
Yes,
and they're going into mental state.
yes,
How would you try and help them
yeah.
so this doesn't happen?
It's a great question. Without going into all the details, there's some things that we're working which will have some impact on that. But I'll just say one or two things about that. I want to give you an honest answer, okay? First of all, some of the mental health crisis, see, the mental health crisis that we see in the modern world, there are things that trigger it, and that's what we're seeing. But there's something that happened before the trigger. There's a susceptibility, and then there's a trigger. You understand? Just like you have, let's say you had an open wound, right? So it's susceptible, but then someone touches it, ow, that's painful. But it was already an open wound. But because of the way that the modern society is, the wounds are already open for many people. And then whether it's unemployment or a parent passing away or a challenging relationship, then the trigger's there, right? But the susceptibility was already there. So, two things. Number one, if people develop proper spirituality, right, and they are informed by this knowledge, it will actually change the way that they deal with their children. I saw something just the other day, and it was talking about this. And there was it was a secular speaker, but she's religious. But when I heard her speak, I knew she understands what she's talking about, because what she said is in Ayurveda. And she was talking about how the parents, how they deal with their children in the early years determines the child's mental resilience. And it doesn't mean the child won't have challenges, but it'll mean that it'll give them the resilience to handle the challenges. So it's not what happens to us. Be very clear on this. It's how strong I am relative to what happens. You see, I may have karma that in this life you're going to go through this situation, this situation, this situation. Okay. However, if I build my strength, then when the situation hits, I'm strong enough to deal with it. If I don't build my strength, when the situation hits, it wipes me out. So even unemployment and different things, what we're meant to do is to make our future generations stronger. You see? And believe it or not, spirituality has a tremendous role to play, and this Vedic knowledge has a tremendous role to play in making the children very, very mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually strong. And so if parents know that science, they can make their children very strong so that whatever the children have to deal with in this lifetime, they're strong enough to deal with it. And to just hone into your particular point, two young adults, both of them get laid off from the same company, both of them are now unemployed. One of them falls into depression, the other one sees it as an opportunity to regroup, relearn. They're looking for opportunities. They're helping out into the community. They're networking, etc., etc. They both experience the same thing, but their mentality towards it is very different. What the Vedic knowledge touches upon is, what was it that made those mentalities different in the first place? And it outlines that science so deeply that if we build that consciousness ultimately, that resilient, strong spiritual consciousness, then no matter what you deal with in life, it will never break you. That's the root solution. Yeah. Now, one other thing. When I was in India recently, one speaker is a multimillionaire. So our group that we took on retreat, they had the session with this multimillionaire, and I tell you honestly, he's a multimillionaire, but he's such a wonderful person, one of the most refined gentlemen I've ever met on this path of bhakti. What he does is he speaks to high net worth individuals and organizations, and he encourages them in what's called dharmic giving. And one of the things he points out to them, and he's had this experience himself, he tells them that if you give properly, if you give to dharmic causes, right? It could be spirituality or other dharmic causes. Spirituality is the best one, by the way. I have to be very transparent about that. Then what happens is, then you will always have abundance coming back to you. Before I got to this path of bhakti, I read a book. The book was called The Spiritual Laws of Financial Success. That was the name of the book. And it was a Christian, I think, or metaphysical writer, and he talks about Christianity and other traditions. He says in all traditions, for example, in Christianity, they call it tithing, right? You're meant to give 10% to spiritual causes. And in the book, and it's true, that book pointed out that when you do that, it comes back. Of course, it's best to do it selflessly. Be very clear, right?
Yeah.
But it's a law. It's a law of reality. So this multimillionaire, he speaks to high net worth individuals and businesses and he tells them to do that. And they do it and they find that by doing that, they always get more and more and more. So yes, on the macro level, because society has been sinful, the good karma of modern society goes down. Therefore, there's depletion of resources and opportunities. However, even within that wider societal context, if we live our lives according to Krishna's laws, you'll find that there's abundance. Abundance may or may not be external. Let's be very clear, because we have karma sometimes. But if you live by Krishna's laws, you will always have internal abundance, no matter what is going on externally. So it's a solution on a material, social, and spiritual level. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank
you for allowing
Thank you.
ask a question.
And on that bombshell, we will stop there. Thank you. Hare Krishna.